I'm really glad you're here today because what I want to talk about in this episode is something that genuinely changed the way I think about food and medicine. And I don't say that lightly. I've been in clinical medicine for a long time, and there are very few moments in this career where you look at a piece of research and think, okay, this is a paradigm shift. But what's coming out of the laboratory right now around stem cells and nutrition? It's one of those moments. So here's the big question we're going to answer today. What if the most powerful regenerative tool you have isn't a drug, isn't a procedure, isn't something you have to pay tens of thousands of dollars for? What if it's sitting in your kitchen right now? I want to take you through the science of what I call your body's internal repair kit. We're going to talk about how it works, why it slows down as we age, and most importantly, what specific foods have now been shown in peer-reviewed clinical research to actually activate and even multiply your regenerative cells. We're going to talk about cacao, we're going to talk about tea, we're going to talk about kiwi fruit, and a few other things that are going to genuinely surprise you. This is not guesswork. This is not supplement marketing. This is real science. And I'm going to walk you through it the way I'd walk through it with a patient in my office. So settle in, grab something to drink, maybe some tea. You'll understand why in a minute. Let's start at the very beginning, because I think the foundation of this conversation is something most people have never been told about their own biology. And it's this. Your body is, right now, at this moment, operating as a stem cell factory. Now, when most people hear the word stem cells, they think of medical headlines. They think of controversial therapies, expensive treatments, maybe some cutting-edge research out of a lab. What they don't think about is their own bone marrow quietly doing this work every single day. But that's exactly what's happening. Let me paint you a picture. From the moment you were conceived, literally from the first division of that fertilized egg, you were made entirely of stem cells. Your entire existence in the womb was one massive, incredibly efficient stem cell factory. Those cells multiplied, differentiated, and became every single organ, every tissue, every blood vessel, every nerve you have in your body right now. It's an extraordinary process. And here's what's remarkable. It doesn't stop at birth. When you came into this world, you carried with you a reserve, a sort of standing army of approximately 700,000 stem cells. These cells set up base camp primarily in two locations, your bone marrow and the lining of your intestines. And they sit there, ready, waiting, monitoring. I like to think of them the way I think about bees in a hive. Most of the time, they're just there, quiet, ordered, in reserve. But the moment a signal goes out, the moment your heart muscle gets stressed, the moment your liver takes a hit, the moment your skin is damaged, those bees fly out of the hive. They enter the bloodstream, and they travel to wherever the damage is, and begin the process of repair and regeneration. That's your built-in repair kit. And it is genuinely one of the most elegant biological systems in the human body. Now, here's where it gets sobering, and I think it's important to be honest about this. By the time most of us reach the second half of our adult lives, we've lost roughly 50% of our original stem cell activity. Half. And the cells that remain? They're often less active, less efficient than they were in our 20s. That's a significant reduction in your body's capacity to heal itself. And yes, some of that is just the natural passage of time. We are born with all the stem cells we'll ever have, and we spend them one by one throughout our lives. That's a reality we have to accept. But here's what I want you to hold on to. Losing activity is not the same as losing all function. The cells are still there. The hive still exists. And as we're now learning, the right signals, specifically signals that come from certain foods, can wake those cells up, mobilize them, and send more of them into circulation. That's documented in peer-reviewed human clinical research. And that's what I want to spend the rest of this episode talking about. Before we get to the good stuff, the foods that actually help, I want to spend a few minutes talking about what hurts your stem cells. Because if you're doing things right now that are crippling your body's repair capacity, it doesn't matter how much dark chocolate you eat. You've got to address the fundamentals first. The two biggest culprits I see in my clinical practice, and that the research supports, are high alcohol consumption and chronic elevated blood sugar. Let's start with alcohol. Now, I'm not here to lecture anyone about their lifestyle choices, but I think people genuinely don't understand the mechanism of what high-dose alcohol does to stem cells. It's not just that it damages the liver, which it does. It's that alcohol directly blunts stem cell activity. It's essentially like taking your bees and sedating them. They're still in the hive, but they're not going anywhere. And if your organs need repair, if your gut lining needs regeneration, if your blood vessels are under stress, those cells are not responding the way they should. The second one, and this one affects a huge portion of the population, is chronic high blood sugar. We talk a lot about diabetes and metabolic syndrome in terms of cardiovascular risk, kidney function, nerve damage, and all of that is real. But one thing we don't talk about enough is what excess sugar does to stem cells. And the research is quite clear. It cripples them. Excess glucose creates an internal environment that is fundamentally hostile to stem cell function. It's like pouring something toxic into the hive. And this matters because you don't have to be a diagnosed diabetic for this to be affecting you. If you're regularly spiking your blood sugar through a diet high in refined carbohydrates, excess sugar, constant snacking, you may be chronically suppressing your own regenerative capacity without knowing it. Now, here's the flip side of that, and I find this genuinely inspiring. A study conducted in Spain looked at elderly individuals, people already in the age range where stem cell activity has naturally declined, and compared those who followed a Mediterranean dietary pattern to those who didn't. The results were striking. People adhering to the Mediterranean diet had 5 times the number of circulating stem cells compared to those who didn't follow the pattern. 5 times. Not a small rounding error. Not a 10% improvement. 5 times. And what I want you to notice about that finding is that it wasn't one specific food. It was a pattern. It was an overall dietary approach that emphasizes whole foods, olive oil, vegetables, legumes, fish, moderate amounts of red wine, a consistent, sustained way of eating that protected and amplified the body's regenerative capacity. That tells us something important. The foundation matters. But on top of that foundation, we now know there are specific foods that have an acute, measurable, remarkable effect on stem cell mobilization. And that's what I want to walk you through now. All right, let me tell you about cacao, because this is one of my favorite topics to discuss with patients. And I want to be upfront. When I first saw this research, I had the same reaction you might be having right now, which was some version of, "Come on, really?" Because we're doctors. We're trained to be skeptical. We're trained to look at extraordinary claims and demand extraordinary evidence. So when someone tells you that drinking hot chocolate can double your stem cell count, your instinct, my instinct, is to raise an eyebrow. But then you look at the study, and you can't argue with it. This research was conducted at the University of California, San Francisco. The participants were 60-year-old men with established heart disease. Not healthy volunteers, not young people at peak physiological function. People whose cardiovascular systems were already compromised, whose blood vessels, in the researcher's own description, were sick and lacked resiliency. These men were given 2 cups of high flavanol hot chocolate every day. This was made with high-quality 80% dark chocolate, the kind with a high concentration of a compound called proanthocyanidins, which are naturally occurring bioactive chemicals found in cacao. And here's what happened. The proanthocyanidins in the cacao triggered a response in the bone marrow. The bone marrow began releasing stem cells into the bloodstream at a significantly elevated rate. Those cells then traveled to the blood vessels. the very blood vessels that were sick and failing, and began repairing them from the inside out. The result? A doubling in the number of circulating stem cells, and a corresponding doubling in the resiliency and function of those blood vessels. Not in young, healthy people, in 60-year-old men with heart disease. That's a remarkable outcome. Now let me explain the mechanism just a little, because I think understanding the why makes this so much more convincing. Proanthocyanidins are a class of polyphenols, plant-based chemical compounds that have essentially co-evolved with the human body over hundreds of thousands of years of us eating plants. These compounds have learned, in a sense, to speak the same biochemical language as our cells. When these compounds enter your bloodstream after you consume cacao, they act as a kind of signal, a chemical message that reaches the bone marrow and essentially says, "We need more repair cells, deploy." And the bone marrow responds. It's not a drug interaction, it's a natural biological conversation that we are now for the first time beginning to understand and document. And I think that's worth sitting with for a moment. Your bone marrow has receptors for compounds that are found in a cup of hot chocolate. That's not an accident of biochemistry. That's millions of years of coevolution between plant compounds and human biology. Now, and I want to be very clear about this, not all chocolate is the same. A milk chocolate bar from a gas station is not going to do this. The proanthocyanidins are found in high concentration in dark chocolate with a high cacao content, and they're best preserved when the cacao is minimally processed. The flavanols that drive this response are delicate, and they can be destroyed by excessive heat processing or heavy alkalization, which is how a lot of commercial chocolate is made. So if you're going to incorporate this into your life, we're talking about high-quality dark chocolate, ideally 80% cacao or higher, and a hot preparation, which actually improves bioavailability. 2 cups a day was the dose used in the study. And no, this is not permission to eat unlimited chocolate, but it is permission to feel genuinely good about a daily ritual of quality hot chocolate, knowing that the science behind it is real. I want to talk about tea next, because this is an area where the science has genuinely evolved, and I think it's a good example of why we should always hold our conclusions loosely. For years, and I mean decades, green tea was the clear winner in the popular health conversation. There was extensive research showing its antioxidant properties, its association with longevity in Asian populations, its positive effects on metabolism, cognition, and yes, circulation. If you told someone you were a tea person and you wanted health cred, you ordered the green tea. Black tea, by contrast, was often dismissed. It was seen as a lesser product, the overprocessed, fermented, caffeinated cousin of green tea that didn't have the same phytonutrient profile. If you were drinking black tea, well, at least you weren't drinking coffee, but you probably weren't doing your body any favors either. And I think it's a wonderful reminder that science is a process, not a destination. Here's what we now understand about the fermentation of black tea. When tea leaves undergo the oxidation process that turns them from green to black, they don't simply lose their bioactive properties, they develop new ones. The fermentation process creates unique bioactive compounds. We're still in the early stages of fully characterizing all of them, that have their own distinct biological effects. And among those effects, we now have evidence that black tea can double the number of stem cells circulating in the bloodstream. The same outcome we saw with green tea. 2 completely different chemical profiles, 2 different routes, arriving at the same destination. More regenerative cells deployed into the bloodstream. This is fascinating from a mechanistic standpoint, because whether you have grown up in a British tradition of black tea in the morning, with or without milk, that's a conversation for another day, or whether you're more comfortable with a traditional green tea practice, the evidence now says both are working in your favor. at a fundamental biological level. I don't think we yet fully understand all the compounds in black tea that are driving this effect. That's the frontier of the research right now. But the outcome data from the studies is clear, and that's enough for me to tell patients. Whichever tea tradition makes you happy, keep doing it. The science now supports both. The broader lesson here is one I come back to a lot in medicine. An open mind is not a weakness. The willingness to update our beliefs when the evidence changes is one of the most important characteristics of a good clinician. And the story of black tea versus green tea is a small but instructive example of that principle. Let's shift gears and talk about the gut, because everything we've discussed so far about stem cells and regeneration is deeply connected to what's happening in your intestinal tract. And I want to start with a study that genuinely surprised me when I first encountered it, because of how fast the results happened. We tend to think of our microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living in our gut, as something that changes slowly. We think of it as a kind of stable ecosystem that maybe shifts over weeks or months in response to dietary changes. And in some ways, that's true for major structural changes. But this study showed us that meaningful, measurable shifts in the gut microbiome can begin happening within 24 hours of a single dietary choice. The food in question was kiwi fruit, and the intervention was simple. Eat 2 kiwis per day. Healthy volunteers in the study did exactly that. And within the first 24 hours, before a single week had passed, before a month of cleaning up their diet, researchers measuring stool samples found significant improvements in the levels of beneficial bacteria in their gut. Now, why does this matter for our broader conversation? Because the gut microbiome and the immune system are not two separate systems. They are inextricably linked. Approximately 70% of your immune system, not a small rounding error, 70%, is located within your intestinal tract, where your gut bacteria are in constant, active communication with your immune cells. The bacteria talk, the immune cells listen, and the nature of that conversation determines everything from how well you respond to a flu vaccine to, and this is where it gets truly important, how effectively your body can fight cancer. So, when you eat 2 kiwis a day and shift your gut microbiome toward beneficial bacteria within 24 hours, you're not just doing something nice for your digestion. You are potentially changing the entire landscape of your immune defense. I want to spend the last section of today's episode on something that I find both scientifically remarkable and deeply personal. Because this is where the conversation about gut bacteria and immune function takes a turn that has life or death implications. Over the past several years, immunotherapy has revolutionized the treatment of certain cancers. For some patients with melanoma, lung cancer, and other malignancies, immunotherapy has achieved what was previously unthinkable: complete and sustained remissions in people who had been told they were out of options. It is, genuinely, one of the great medical stories of our era. But there's a problem. Not everyone responds. Some patients receive immunotherapy and see dramatic benefits. Others receive the exact same treatment and see nothing. And for a long time, we didn't understand why. We didn't know what separated the responders from the non-responders. And then researchers started looking at the gut. What they found was a bacterium called Akkermansia muciniphila. It's a specific microorganism that lives in your gut, and it has a very particular job. It grows in the mucus lining of the intestine, and when it's present and active, it does something remarkable to the immune system. It effectively lights up the immune cells. It activates them, and crucially, it allows the immune system to uncloak cancer cells that are hiding from it. Cancer cells are clever. One of their survival mechanisms is essentially to disguise themselves, to fly under the radar of the immune system and avoid detection. Immunotherapy drugs work by stripping away that disguise. But if the immune system is sluggish, if it doesn't have the right bacterial support, the uncloaking doesn't work well enough. Here's what the research showed. Patients who responded to immunotherapy and survived had Akkermansia muciniphila in their gut. Patients who didn't respond to the treatment lacked it. That's how significant the presence of this single bacterium was to treatment outcome. Now here's the critical and practical question. How do you get more of it? And this is where the answer might surprise you. Because it's not as simple as going to the health food store and buying an Akkermansia probiotic. You cannot just eat this bacteria directly and have it colonize your gut in a meaningful way. What you have to do instead is feed it, create the conditions in which it thrives. And here's how that works, step by step. Pomegranate contains a class of bioactive compounds called elegotannins. When you eat pomegranate, the seeds, the juice, the arils, these elegotannins enter your gut, and they trigger the lining of your intestine to secrete a specific type of protective mucus. That mucus is exactly the environment in which Akkermansia muciniphila grows and thrives. So the chain looks like this: pomegranate elegotannins, intestinal mucus production, Akkermansia flourishes, immune system activation, cancer cells uncloaked, immunotherapy can work. It is one of the most beautiful examples I have ever encountered of food and medicine working together. Not food instead of medicine, not medicine instead of food, both working in concert through a biological pathway that we are only now beginning to understand. And this is not just an abstract scientific concept. There are real human stories behind this research. Former President Jimmy Carter, diagnosed with metastatic melanoma, had spread to his brain. He received immunotherapy and achieved a complete remission that his oncologists described as remarkable. We now have strong reason to believe that the state of the gut microbiome plays a meaningful role in outcomes like his. So what does this mean for you, practically? It means that pomegranate is not just a delicious fruit. It is a potential ally to your immune system. It means that what you eat in the weeks before and during any medical treatment could matter more than we ever previously realize. It means that the conversation your doctor has with you about your diet is not secondary to the conversation about your medications. They may be equally important. And the broccoli sprout story takes this one step further. A study of 29 volunteers receiving a flu vaccine showed that participants who drank 2 cups of broccoli sprout shakes daily alongside their vaccine showed a 22-fold increase in their immune response compared to the control group. 22 times. Not a marginal benefit. A transformation of the immune response to a standard medical intervention, driven by a food. We are watching, in real time, the birth of a new understanding of medicine. It is not food as medicine in the old, naive supplement marketing sense. It is food and medicine, 2 sophisticated biological technologies. One developed by nature over millions of years of plant evolution. One developed by human science over the past century, working in synergy, meeting each other.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the journey.
So, let me pull all of this together for you because I know we've covered a lot of ground today. Your body has a stem cell repair kit. It is real, it is biological, it is constantly operating in the background of your existence. It naturally declines with age and is suppressed by things like alcohol and chronic high blood sugar. But it is not beyond influence, not by a long shot. High-quality dark cacao, consumed as 2 cups of hot chocolate a day, has been shown in clinical trials to double circulating stem cells and improve blood vessel function in men with heart disease. Green tea and black tea, both of them, have been shown to have similar regenerative effects on stem cell mobilization. 2 kiwis a day can begin to shift your gut microbiome toward beneficial bacteria within 24 hours. Pomegranate feeds the gatekeeper bacteria that lights up your immune system, and may be the difference between responding to cancer immunotherapy or not. Broccoli sprouts, consumed alongside a vaccine, can multiply the immune response by 22 times. None of this is magic. All of it is biology. And the most important takeaway I want to leave you with today is this: every meal is a message. Every meal sends a signal to your bone marrow, to your gut bacteria, to your immune cells, to your blood vessels. The question is not whether food affects your biology. The science has settled that. The question is what message you want to be sending. I'm not telling you to be perfect. I'm not telling you to follow a rigid protocol or feel guilty about every food choice. But I am telling you that when you reach for that cup of good dark chocolate, when you brew that pot of tea, when you add pomegranate to your diet, when you grab a couple of kiwis, you are doing something real, something that your future self, the one whose blood vessels are a little more resilient, whose immune system is a little more activated, whose repair kit is running a little better, will thank you for. That's what I've got for you today. I hope it was useful. I hope it changed something about the way you think about what's on your plate. If it did, share it with someone you care about, because this is the kind of information that should not stay locked in academic journals. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next episode.